Daily active users versus monthly active users.
Yep.
Which one is more important to you?
I think of it as a funnel. Semi-annual active users, quarterly active users, monthly active users, weekly active users, daily active users. We're not picking necessarily one to optimize for, but we do look closely at the ratios.
How do you handle situations where performance may deviate from these normalized trends?
Not having as much of like a kind of rigid structure where you have finance people and product people. We still have those disciplines, but at more of a networked structure with a GM kind of at the helm.
You threw this term at me, the final boss.
It is the indirect cash flow statement. And the way it was set up is almost like a matrix. There's rows and there's columns. It was really hard, but there was an incredible amount of pride and satisfaction that came with solving the puzzle.
Is this thing on?
Yesterday's price is not today's price.
Welcome back to Run the Numbers, a very special episode of Run the Numbers. We recorded at none other than the New York Stock Exchange. Yes, they let me in. I interviewed Dan Betts, CFO of SoundCloud, on the evolution of the music industry. SoundCloud sits in the middle of 1 million fans and 9 million creators. It's essentially a marketplace business that's monetized through subscriptions. So Dan takes us into the mind of a CFO who's trying to balance liquidity on both sides, the metrics he looks at on a daily basis to keep the trains running on time, and how often he reforecasts the business. Dan is also super passionate about the intersection of tops down and bottoms up forecasting and driving to an answer that department leaders feel like they own. It's not just being pushed onto them. And he's a master communicator. I think this is an underrated skill for a lot of finance people. He emphasizes you have to cater towards the audience you're presenting to, know your customer, and also just explain stuff to people in plain English. Nobody likes something who's going to church it up, as they say in Joe Dirt.
Don't try and church it up, son. Don't you mean Joe Dirt?
All this and much, much more. Dan, thank you for joining me on the Run the Numbers podcast at the New York Stock Exchange. Pretty cool, huh?
Yeah, never been here, first time.
It's quite the view for an office. I'm thinking about like they can make this box into a WeWork or something.
It's like a nice little aquarium.
I want to do some quick hitters because this is a historical place. Me and you, we've had dinner together, and I think we found out pretty quickly that we're both business nerds. Do you remember the first stock you ever bought?
I remember as a little kid looking through, my dad would get the USA Today and I would go to the finance section and like companies I knew, I would like look at the stock ticker, but I was probably in my mid 20s when I had, paid off some debt and had a little bit of money to invest. And I had read Ramit Sethi's, The Financial Guru, his book, and I just followed his super boring advice and bought a Vanguard index fund. Like the cheapest thing I could buy that was like balanced. So it's not like no flyer.
You were diversified from the beginning, my friend.
Yeah.
When you think back on IPOs, right, I think a lot of us have this picture of a company ringing the bell. You get the picture of the founder, the CFO on stage. Is there one company or one moment that comes to mind like, oh, I remember that IPO?
I lived in Chicago from 2007 to 2014.
Okay.
And from maybe 08 to 2010, the darling startup of Chicago that everyone wanted to work for was Groupon.
I knew you were going to say Groupon. Yes.
I had an interview there to be the assistant to the controller. So I didn't interview with the CFO, but I interviewed with the controller, the technical controller, because they were doing so many acquisitions and the purchase accounting was crazy. I thought I did really well in the interview. I thought I absolutely crushed it. And I didn't get rejected. I got ghosted. I emailed, I called the recruiter. I never heard from them. And then I found out later on that a lot of people had gotten ghosted. They grew so fast.
They might email you back today and be like, hey, by the way, you got the job.
I remember the weather that day. It was a super cold February day in Chicago. I remember sitting in their lobby, manifesting, this is the place that I'm going to work now. I was devastated. If you think about their IPO, they IPO'd in either 2011 or 2012. I think they set it at $20. A year later, it was $3. And so it's an epic rise and fall. It kind of had everything. They had voodoo accounting, and there was an SEC investigation. I would have been in that.
Implicated potentially.
Maybe, who knows? Depends how I would have acted if I had gotten that job. They had the accounting issues.
I think you dodged a bullet there, honestly. Do you think the benefits of being a public company are the same? I think it's changed a lot in the last 30 years.
Think the benefits are what they used to be, mostly because private capital markets have just expanded so much. So if your primary goal is to just get access to growth capital, and you can do that without the whole rigmarole of and red tape of going public, why would you?
There is an element, though, of the publicity of it all. I mean, this is a pretty cool media setup. People get to know the company's name. And I think, like, if you're core infrastructure to a company, they probably want to know you're a going concern and can see, get inside the books and feel good about it. So I don't know if it's the same or if it's just different being a public company these days.
I'm not sure. I'm interested to see, like 10 years from now, are there more or less these trends have a way of kind of coming and going? Like, the SPAC thing was super hot. It kind of fizzled out.
I want to talk about SoundCloud and the music industry. I was incredibly pumped to have you here today because I've grown up a user of SoundCloud, a fan of a lot of the artists on the platform, and I'm also just fascinated in the business model. How do you think about the evolution of the music industry?
So it was founded in 2007. It's been around 18 years. It was founded the same year as Spotify, and the mission was to connect artists and fans directly through music. And 18 years later, SoundCloud today, it's really the only global two-sided music platform that enables direct artist to fan discovery, engagement, and monetization at scale. One of our credos is, in a world where streaming alone, it doesn't sustain the vast majority of artists, or it also doesn't really satisfy kind of super fans who really crave engagement. And it's more than just like, there's a big difference between like what we call passive music consumption, like the phone's in your pocket and like, oh my gosh, like I love this. I want to like drop a comment on it. I'm going to get a message back from the artists. Been a lot of latent demand for that. And SoundCloud is very well situated now to capitalize on how the music industry is moving towards creator-centric platforms, specifically platforms that facilitate really deep engagement, provide monetization opportunities beyond just streaming. So that's a bit kind of on the SoundCloud background. The question of the evolution of the music industry, to tell that story, you really kind of need to zoom out and look at what's happened in the music industry over maybe the past like 25, 30 years. To me, that story, it's around three major shifts or kind of three distinct eras of the music industry. There's the physical era, the streaming era, and then kind of what we're in now, which is the creator platform era. Before streaming, the music industry largely orbited around the major content owners, the major labels, and the publishers. They had tremendous amount of power. They controlled music recording, controlled manufacturing, they controlled marketing and distribution channels.
It was vertically integrated in a lot of ways.
Yep. They had a ton of negotiating leverage over artists. Their business model, selling albums, was a beautiful model for them. It was a bundle. You can think of it like kind of the way that like cable was.
There's a bundle of songs in that way, you mean?
Analogous to cable, where like if you really needed ESPN, you had to buy like 150 channels. In the 90s, if you heard a song and you're like, I love that song so much, I need to be able to listen to that song whenever I want, you had to buy the whole album. The price of a CD, maybe in the early 90s, was like 15, 17 bucks.
Yeah.
It's 30 bucks in today's dollars. So the margins were really good, in addition to vertically integrated, all the control that the majors had over kind of the whole ecosystem, negotiating leverage that they had over artists because they controlled access to the distribution channels, in maybe the mid to late aughts, streaming.
What was the first major streaming platform?
I don't know if Spotify was technically the first one, but it was certainly the first one that gained popularity.
Yeah, I think Pandora may have started earlier, but it was more like Russ Hanneman radio on the internet, more so than a streaming platform.
So when streaming came along, that completely changed the economics of music consumption. What used to be a great deal for content owners and not so great of a deal for the consumers, digital streaming music consumption is an incredible deal for consumers. So you've got like maybe in today's dollars, $30 for an album versus, 10, 11 bucks a month to listen to all the world's music for as much as you want. So it was kind of an unbundling of that old model. Over time, streaming scaled globally. You can look at the MAU for like Spotify, advertising monetization improved. So the overall kind of digital revenue pie, like the amount of royalties earned from consumption digitally, that pie started to really grow to a size that could support the label ecosystem. I said it before, the fact remains that the vast majority of artists, like thinking about everyone who's creating music, streaming economics alone are not enough to support the vast majority of artists. And that reality has led to the era that we're entering now, which is the creator platform era. And that's about scaled platforms that connect fans and creators directly, which provides a foundation for a two-sided marketplace. The barriers to making music and distributing music, they're lower than they've ever been. You used to have to know how to read sheet music and know how to play an instrument and know somebody who could get you into a studio, probably have a relationship with a label to hook you up with a producer. Now artists can create independently, they can distribute globally, they can market through social platforms, they can monetize across multiple channels, and they don't need a label to do it. So they can truly be independent. The trade-off to that is the supply of music, the amount of tracks being released is exploding relative to what it used to be, and AI and generative AI tools like Suno and Udio play a part in that. The kind of pool is a little bit more crowded, so standing out, maybe if you're an artist, maybe feels like it's a little bit harder, but in this moment, compared to the way things used to be, creators have more ownership, they have more leverage over their own destiny, they have more direct access than ever before, really. That's what makes SoundCloud such an interesting business that's really well positioned for the moment that we're in now. We're a two-sided platform that's built specifically for music, connecting creators and fans. On the fan side, we monetize through subscriptions and ads. On the creator side, we monetize through tools, services, and distribution. And strategically, we think about the future value in music is increasingly being not just about passive consumption, but about connection and community and direct monetization.
Hey, thanks for listening. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors. I've seen a lot of fp&a tools, and Aleph is one of the few that gave me that aha moment within minutes. I remember watching their founder, shout out to Albert, connect my NetSuite data and build me a full P&L live in minutes. Aleph is now trusted by hundreds of leading companies. I've had the CFOs from Turo, 8Sleep, Zapier, and more on the pod, and every one of them is a huge advocate. I also just published my second annual CFO Tech Stack report, and Aleph has been on the podium both years, including a #1 finish in the $50 to $100 million segment this year. Instead of being just another planning tool, they built a real enterprise-grade data foundation for finance, implemented at startup speed with AI-native workflows woven into its DNA. All your systems, ERP, CRM, HRIS, ATS, product usage, and more, powering one clean, governed data layer that finance can actually trust. And with AI moving as fast as it is, they're pushing even further. MCP, custom AI chatbots, AI-powered variance analysis, and the list keeps growing. Try it with your own data at getaleph.com/run. That is GETALEPH.com/run. Tell them CJ sent you.
Here's a growth tax that nobody talks about. Every new pricing model you ship creates a nightmare for your finance team. Usage-based pricing? Now you're tracking usage against commitments. Product bundles? Now you're untangling what to recognize and when for every line item. Mid-cycle upgrades? Good luck manually reallocating revenue. The pricing strategies that drive growth are the same ones that break your finance process. RightRev turns that irony into a competitive advantage. Your product team can ship new pricing without asking finance for permission, and your sales team can close deals without worrying about downstream chaos. But I've seen too many companies where sales are celebrating a huge quarter while finance is still trying to figure out how to recognize half of it. It's actually me. So here's a good place to start. RightRev built a free tool at calculator.rightrev.com. It scores your RevRec process, shows what's exposing you to risk, and tells you exactly where to focus before it bites you in the rear. Probably explains why your last close took so long. Check it out at calculator.rightrev.com. All right, without the Boston accent, calculator.rightrev.com. I got news for you. The ERP category is finally getting disrupted. And if you haven't heard of Rillet yet, please pay attention. It's the AI-native ERP built specifically to replace NetSuite, and it's already won over hundreds of finance teams. Their mission is to make the zero-day close a reality, and they're actually doing it. We're talking teams closing the books at 1:35 p.m. on the first day of the month. Companies like Windsurf, Mercor, and hundreds of others run their entire finance stack on Rillet. Revenue recognition, close management, multi-entity, native Stripe and Salesforce integrations, woo! Everything a scaling company needs. They've got 5.0 stars on G2. They're backed by A16Z and Sequoia, heard of them,
and CPA-led implementations that get you live in 45 days. That is simply unheard of in the ERP space. If your books aren't running as fast as your business, check out Rillet. Book a demo at rillet.com/CJ. That is RILLET.com/CJ. That's me.
I've always thought about SoundCloud as the place you go to have a deeper relationship with whichever artists that you enjoy listening to. I think I heard you say passive before. If you think about some of these other platforms where you just have maybe headphones in your ear and you're doing work or something, or you're in the car driving, but like if you're a true fan of somebody, you want to support them. And it seems like it's a model that aligns with the longer tail of artists who may not have the distribution of a Drake.
We have 100 million active fans, 9 million creators. That's a good foundation it's a good foundation for two-sided engagement. I think that's part of our uniqueness, that we've operated at scale on both sides of the ecosystem, fans and creators. And it's something that the other platforms who touched on it, they don't fully replicate. Maybe they do part of it, but they don't replicate what we do on both sides of the marketplace. Streaming services like Spotify or Apple Music, they have massive listener reach, but they have limited direct relationships with artists. Labels and artist management companies, they have deep relationships with artists, but they don't have their own fan-facing platform.
We're on a podcast right now. We're going direct to people. There isn't, a label in between us. I think it allows you to have a relationship that feels more organic with whoever's supporting it.
Yeah, you don't need to go through a distribution channel and be told by somebody else what your fans and listeners think of you.
Anecdotally, I've heard that touring plays a huge part in how artists make money today. Is that true?
Yeah, kind of going back to like the bundled business model being super high margin, and now that the unit economics for what you can earn just from music consumption being less now than it was, but there are a lot more monetization opportunities. Like I'm sure a lot of your listeners have experienced that people that like going to concerts, like it's pretty expensive to go to a concert. But the model in like maybe say the 80s or even 90s was tour so you can sell albums.
So you can sell the album, yeah. And now isn't it like sell the music?
Or it's like release music so you give people a reason to want to go see you tour, and then the ticket prices are a lot higher than they used to be. And that's where a lot of people still buy merch.
Yeah, it's interesting how you go through this bundling and unbundling in any sort of business model, and then people identify different surface areas to monetize different marginal opportunities.
Yes.
Dan walks into work, CFO of SoundCloud. What's the first metric you want to get a glimpse at?
One that I check in the morning every day, even on weekends. There's an automated kind of dashboard that gets sent to pretty much everyone in the company, and it is net adds. So it is the day before, how many subscribers did we add? Fan paid subscriber or creator paid subscriber. I look at that first just to get a pulse check, and then I will double click to see there's 3 components of net adds. There's a first-time subscriber, there's a one-back subscriber, somebody who maybe subscribed a year ago and then it churned out and then they came back, and then there's churn subscribers. So I just want to get a sense of kind of how those are moving. There's a lot of engagement metrics on the interactions between fans and creators and different ways to look at listening time. We keep a close eye on those. They're primary signals of depth of usage, but I think about those kind of in the context of how they're trending over time, not necessarily something that I'm reflexively checking every day, but net adds I check.
This is a super nerdy question, but the net adds part, first of all, I think it's amazing because it allows you to just be in the rhythm of the business. Do different days traditionally have more net adds than others?
Weekends are better. One of our sweet spots are DJ sets. If they hadn't been on the platform in a while, the thing that got them back is a friend of theirs saying hey, they found this DJ set. I know you like a certain DJ, and I see that they dropped their last set from a music festival on SoundCloud. I'll send you a link to it, and that might be the thing that kind of gets you back.
Daily active users versus monthly active users.
Yep.
Which one is more important to you?
I think of it as a funnel. Semi-annual active users, quarterly active users, monthly active users, weekly active users, daily active users. We're not picking necessarily one to optimize for, but we do look closely kind of at the ratios of those. What's fun is, when we have a go-to-market or some comms around a big product launch or a product feature, is seeing which ones get inflected or not.
So we were talking to Rama, Katkar, CFO of Notion, and what she was saying is that they've done campaigns in the past that you can't even predict how good they'll do.
and they pop off. Like they did something where basically you could create your own like emoticon of your face within Notion, and it went nuts. Like didn't have that in our forecasting model. I'm sure there are exogenous events that happen with artists, with DJ sets, with, I think we just had
Coachella.
that just happened. I'm sure there are things like that on the calendar that will happen that cause things to go up or down.
Yeah, you get pops from viral moments. It's sad, but you get a pop if an artist passes away.
I've been looking for a way to work Lil Peep into my podcast for years now, so rest in peace. Heard him first on SoundCloud. LTV, lifetime value.
Yeah.
Do you think about LTV on both sides of the platform?
Like all direct-to-consumer subscription businesses, we need to have a deep understanding of our sales funnel. All the way at the top of the funnel may be like, the very tip top could just be like impressions from a campaign, app installs, to they signed up, to they took a trial of, a free trial to experience the benefits of being a paid subscriber, the interactions that they have on the homepage. What does week 1 retention, month 1 retention look like, all the way down to kind of build your retention curves over a period of time.
We're talking cohorts here.
Yeah, we're talking cohorts. Optimizing those is the name of the game in any direct-to-consumer subscription business. We're refreshing them all the time, but we're really scrutinizing them on a monthly basis. And certainly anytime we're doing a reforecast or a budgeting season, we're deeply analyzing it from like a cohorted retention perspective. If you want to hold a marketing team accountable for maybe something higher up in the funnel, and the product team who's working on like, how do we make the homepage and the discovery page more engaging and more personalized for people, you would expect maybe those product things to have an improvement on week 1 retention, month 1 retention, whereas maybe marketing is more about like, hey, let's get more people to have familiarity and exposure to the app.
Hey, thanks for listening. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors.
Maybe the first thought you had when you started a tech company wasn't about scenario modeling or runway management or the fine print of an S1. I love a good S1. That's not where the magic happens. It's more fun to build something new, design your quarter zip, or network with VCs. But what if you got your financials right early, long before your investors started asking for it? There's no limit to how far you can go and how many headaches you could stave off. Now, that's where EY comes in. EY has been a part of Silicon Valley since, well, it was just a valley. And it's helped some of the most successful names in tech go from startup to exit to mega cap. You build the next big thing, and with the teams across strategy, tax, audit, and transactions, EY will help you build your next big thing right. Learn more at ey.com/tech-startups. That's ey.com/tech-startups. Let me ask you something. If your board wants financials, would you be certain you're not wasting money on SaaS? Or if a major renewal hits, would you know if you're paying a fair price? Your vendors would. They see thousands of deals every year. But most finance and procurement teams see one deal at a time. That's a tough way to negotiate. SpendHound fixes that intelligence gap. It's one place to track all your software spend and gives you pricing benchmarks across more than 10,000 SaaS and AI vendors. And it's based on real spend data from over 8,000 companies. SpendHound connects to your financial systems and shows every software dollar you're spending. Contracts, renewal dates, overlapping tools. Nothing quietly auto-renews, and you don't pay twice for duplicate tools. SpendHound is the #1 rated SaaS spend management platform on G2. It's trusted by teams at ZoomInfo, Hootsuite, and Kit. Free forever, wow, for SMB, and only $10,000 per year for enterprise, with $150,000 savings guaranteed. If you want to stop negotiating blind, go to spendhound.com/CJ. That's spendhound.com/CJ. Trusted by over 1,000 finance, ops, and procurement teams. The CFO role has evolved faster than the tools built to support it. Most finance teams are still running infrastructure designed for a job that no longer exists. The reporting, the reconciling, the close that bleeds into the next month or quarter. That's not finance, that's overhead with a really crappy title. And the cost isn't just your time, it's everything your best people aren't doing while they're buried in it. Agentic finance shouldn't multiply your output, it should eliminate the work that was never worth doing in the first place. And that's why I run mostly media on Brex, an intelligent finance platform with AI-powered agents that capture expenses automatically, enforce policy before the spend happens, and close your books in minutes instead of weeks. 35,000 companies like OpenAI, Coinbase, Anthropic, and DoorDash already run on Brex. It's time to get Brex AF.
Learn more at brex.com/metrics.
You teed me up nicely because I do want to talk about your modeling philosophy.
Yeah.
Are you more of a bottoms up or tops down modeling kind of guy?
I like to do both. The key is when you do both, you at some point you need to reconcile them. Certainly when I'm doing budgeting and what will be like kind of the backup for my budget models, that's all going to be bottoms up work. Unless maybe it's something exploratory like a new line of business or something like that, where it's like you don't yet have the baseline trends that would be the input ingredients into the model.
And we were just talking about cohorts. I'm sure you get information from that for this.
Before I kind of do the formal budgeting, which is going to have a lot of bottoms up work, I like to conduct some sort of strategic assessments and planning among leadership, GMs, key functional leads across product and marketing on each business line. And that's to me where the top-down planning can be useful, because you don't need to bring everybody kind of into the models. You should be hiring good fp&a and finance people and trust the models. And I really want my GMs also to have a deep understanding of the models and trust the models. Makes it easier to have them kind of hold people accountable. After 1H results are in, you have a good sense of lagging indicators, how the business is performing in the first half of the year. You should have a good sense of how the year is going to shape up, and your kind of predictive indicators and assessment on the effectiveness of your growth tactics. It's also a good time to kind of align with check in with your board or your investors to make sure that, the management is aligned with the board on their expectations. They may want maximum growth at all costs. They may want to see operating leverage sooner rather than later. So those kind of top-down assessments, that kind of informs the top-down target. And so say you maybe land at we have to grow 25% next year. To me, bottoms up is then how you validate that, and you want to hold people accountable to it. I'm not telling GMs hey, you got to grow revenue 25%, figure it out. That conversation to me, to make it productive and to hold people accountable and to have some discipline around it, is, hey, we've got our model. So maybe the model for net ads is a top of funnel and some sort of history and baseline trends of kind of how the funnel gets down to trial starts and trial conversions. Business like SoundCloud has been around for a while, so we have a good baseline on a lot of metrics. And in those strategic planning, we're kind of talking about these tactics seem to work. Maybe these ones aren't working as well. These are some of the new fresh tactics. You align those tactics with what you hope they should move, whether it's churn or something in the top of funnel. You then make assumptions on when you tune those and by how much, and then trust the model that maybe spits out 25%. And I'm not focusing the people on the 25%. I'm focusing people on the inputs.
So to you, is revenue an output or is it an input?
Yeah, I think revenue's an output. That's how I like to talk about it.
So you're walking them through the levers to end up there.
Yeah, and walk them through the arithmetic.
How do you handle situations where performance may deviate from these normalized trends? Because you have this baseline of data that goes all the way back to 2007. But then you're also tweaking the model along the way to make sure that you're optimizing for both sides of this two-sided business. What's your reaction when you have this forecast and something deviates?
I want to make sure that we have the infrastructure in place to actually get that feedback as close to real time as possible, so that you're not in May being oh shoot, we just caught that something in February started to deviate. Once you kind of have that infrastructure in place, the question is the information flow. What I like and what's been working really well for us is not having as much of a kind of rigid structure where you have finance people and product people and data people.
How do you think about it?
People. We still have those disciplines, but at kind of more of a networked structure with a GM kind of at the helm. That GM needs to have a really good understanding of the model and what assumptions kind of were tuned and what the expectations are kind of based on the baseline. When things do start to deviate, you have to really rely on their judgment to kind of know who to spin up, because it may be hey, we did this big go to market and we didn't see it move these metrics. We need marketing to deeper dive over here. It may be somebody who's super close to the app user data,
User experience, product data.
I like that structure where you've kind of got a little bit more of a generalist who's at the helm and, in an ideal world kind of has a control panel where they're getting either a green light or a red light that's going off.
How often do you think a company should revisit or reset its plan?
You're always assessing, but you're not always changing.
I like to be formal about doing a pulse check in kind of early or mid Q2. Certainly the first quarter, maybe the first 4-5 months under the belt, you should have pretty good pulse on how you think.
If you're 5 months in, you should know what you're going to be at in 6 months.
You should have good indicators for how the year is going to play out. And so I'll usually do an updated reforecast at some point in Q2, and it may be we're just kind of holding to the budget. And then I like to kind of do that same pulse check again in Q3, kind of around in that time where you're doing like the strategic planning and then starting to get into budget mode. Because if you're doing the budget, say in September, October, I want to be really dialed in and buttoned up on how the year's going to play out, so that like on January 1st of the next year, I'm not like, oh, my budget was a little bit off on a run rate perspective.
You threw this term at me, the final boss. I love this term. You got to walk me through it. What does it mean?
It is the indirect cash flow statement, which was an assignment that I got in 2007 at my first job at Deloitte. Was auditing a very large real estate investment trust in Chicago. They were the second biggest owner and operator of malls. Maybe they still do. I don't know if they do, but they owned South Street Seaport. They owned Water Tower Place. I don't remember what their market cap was, but they were humongous. 10 Qs, 10 Ks. I was staffed on it year round. After my maybe 6 months of being on engagement, they gave me the cash flow statement to audit. This was 2007. So this is like an Excel-based work paper. It took 2 months maybe to audit. And the way it was set up was like a puzzle. It was really hard, but there was an incredible amount of pride and satisfaction that came with solving the puzzle. And it really kind of scratched the nerd itch in me. When I was a sophomore in college and I had my first financial accounting class, I was just like, I kind of like this. And the way it's set up is almost like a matrix. There's rows and there's columns, and the rows are all the lines of a cash flow statement. So if it's an indirect cash flow statement, you're starting with net income and then you're bridging down to cash flows. So your net income is everything that flows through equity. Then you have to assign or ascribe all the movements in the balance sheet to where they should sit in the cash flow statement, whether it's an operating activity, a financing activity, an investing activity.
There's nowhere to hide.
The y-axis, the rows are the lines of a cash flow statement, and then the columns are the changes in every single balance sheet account. And then the cells in between, it's almost like tic-tac-toe. You have to investigate, okay, deferred revenue moved from X to Y. And there's a narrative that goes with that. We sold more annual subscriptions than we burned off in deferred revenue. But sometimes for maybe a PP&E account or a CapEx account, the whole change isn't all going to go into one row. So you really have to that's why I said there's nowhere to hide. You have to drill into it. You have to have a lot of conversations with the client and kind of figure out where everything slots in.
Enron didn't even want to have a balance sheet. So why is this so important to a business like yours? You don't have stuff that you can touch really in the real world, but I'm guessing it helps you get a grip on why things are moving.
I want the people that work on my team and the people that work for me to have a very high fluency in how they talk about the business, especially in today's environment where even growth companies aren't being valued as much on, maybe for an AI company, but here's a super high revenue multiple. There's a huge focus on cash flows, and it's not uncommon for a company to have a pretty big difference between their cash flow and their net income or their EBITDA.
Their adjusted EBITDA.
Or their adjusted EBITDA. And so me as a CFO, if I'm sitting in the boardroom or talking to the investors, I need to be able to talk about how you bridge between those two numbers. Maybe they're close to each other, but maybe they're not. And if they're not, I need to be able to really tell that story. And I need to know what I'm talking about. And I need the people that work for me to know it too. And there's really just no better way than to actually get in there. When you do that work, the kind of magic of double entry accounting is what's at play. You have to kind of think almost like T accounts.
I've been in a room too where I was walking somebody on my board through what our EBITDA was. And I'm like, I'm just making it up, and that'll get us to 11.2. And he's like, I have you at 14.4. And then I'm like, really? And so we were both talking about profitability, but different ways of looking at it, right? So I was talking about it from the operator's perspective. He was talking about it from the management perspective of what they were going to be able to pay dividends on. And then there could have been this third voice in the room, which would have been what the credit agreement would have said it is. So all three can be true, but if you can't bridge between them, you may as well just stop talking at that point because nobody's going to agree, and you can be right, but actually wrong.
Yeah, it's like pro forma A, pro forma B, pro forma C. This one goes there, this one goes there, this one's for this purpose.
To your point, like being able to walk through that, you know the business better than anybody else.
And I think for CFOs, the number one currency we have is credibility.
Speaking of credibility, a lot of that comes down to communication. You've told me that you like to talk about things in plain English. I think we've lost that a bit in today's business environment, especially on LinkedIn.
Every post is like a poem.
What's the best practice when you're speaking internally with your team, talking in plain English? Will you tell people to slow down and like talk to me like I'm a 5-year-old?
I tell people to slow down. I say, pretend I have the intelligence of a dog. Try to avoid jargon. Keep it nice and slow. Signal when you're going to move on to something. A big thing for me is the power of reps. It's a spectrum, like coming onto this podcast, going into a board meeting, doing an all hands. Like those are things that have made me anxious and make me nervous. But the more reps you get doing something, then it becomes less of a big deal and you kind of get into this flow. For someone else, just having to lead the team meeting may be something that makes them a little bit nervous. And so you need to give them those reps. And when people are nervous, I think they have a tendency to maybe talk really fast, or if there's a little bit of insecurity or imposter syndrome at play, which I've certainly felt and experienced in my journey, there can be a tendency to over-explain. And, nothing screams confidence more than like, well, you hired me for a reason. Like, I know this stuff. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time proving that to you over and over again. I'm going to tell you what you need to know. And if you want to know more, you can ask me.
Brevity.
Yeah.
Important skill.
Yes.
As a CFO, you think shorter can be better?
I don't want to say shorter is better than longer. I think succinct and to the point, continuing to sharpen your judgment on how should this subject matter be presented. It needs to be tailored to the audience to some extent.
It does.
It's almost like the more higher up that I'm presenting to, the simpler I go. It's a little counterintuitive, but I mean, if you think about somebody who's on a board, they probably have like 10 or 12.
They probably think
board
of you
seats.
5 hours a year.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe a little more than that.
Probably a little more. And, I would much rather have them say like, yeah, we got that. We can move on or tell me more about that than to really just kind of get lost in what you're saying or glaze over. I appreciate it when people assume that I don't have much context and don't really know what they're talking about, so they can walk me through it, and then I can maybe speed them up a little bit. I prefer that more than somebody who assumes I'm like all the way here on the learning curve, and they're starting on like second base.
Dan, I'm going to take you into what we call our long ass lightning round. I ask every successful person who comes on the podcast, give me an example of something you've screwed up on the job before.
I've worked in kitchens for a lot of years. I've been a dishwasher. I've been a line cook, the guy who runs the tickets. I've worked the grill, the fryer. I think it was still when I was a dishwasher. I hadn't like graduated to line cook yet. We would do these large banquet dinners that would have like a New York strip steak, a baked potato, and corn. You get the count for how many people you need to feed, and you always want to go over that a little bit. One of my jobs was to shuck all the corn. It may have been for like 150 people.
It's a lot of shucking.
And I just completely spaced out and miscounted. And there were no controls in place. They were just relying on me saying that like, we need 125 ears of corn. So there's 150 here. There's probably like 100. 80% of the way through, like people kind of go through the line. And I was maybe 15 years old and the chef just chewed me out.
Do you remember the feeling at the time?
I felt really small.
Yeah, I think we've been there. If you could tell your younger self something knowing what you know today, what would you tell him?
Lean into discomfort. Development and growth, things that we all kind of innately crave. They really can't happen unless you're willing to kind of go sidle up to your comfort zone and then test the waters on the other side of it. Earlier in my career, I would shy away from public speaking, proactively being one of the more assertive voices in the room. That's not a way that I was wired. As I kind of got further in my career and then I'm working with really talented people, I've been lucky to have mentors who kind of instilled in me the mindset of practice reps, doing it in a controlled environment. You just get little wins and then all of a sudden like a year or two goes by and you're like, oh, I'm like doing things now.
I really like that example because I remember I was at PwC and the first public speaking I had to do was virtually leading people through a book club. But I was terrified to do it. And I was just filling the room with noise just because I was insecure about it. But I firmly believe that every part of growth is either on the other side of a phone call you don't want to make or a public speaking thing that's like, we're doing it live that you're afraid to do. But coming out the other side, it's like, okay, put that brick down. Next one. Last question I got for you. What's the craziest thing you've ever had someone try to expense?
I had someone expense a massage. They had a long flight to Japan, came off the plane with a stiff neck, and didn't want to be like too stiff or rigid for the presentation.
Dan, this has been an absolute blast.
Yeah, I had a
appreciate
really
you
good
joining
time.
me here. This means a lot.
Time flied.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
Cool.
Run the Numbers is a mostly media production. Yelling and intro by Fat Joe. Artwork by Meg D'Alessandro. Show is executive produced by Ben Hillman. Nothing said on this podcast is intended to be business or investment advice. It's the sole opinion of me, a guy who feeds his dog way too much ice cream and has a history of net operating losses. LOL. If you like this podcast, hit subscribe and give us 5 stars. It will take like 2 seconds and our algorithm overlords love it. Drink water, call your mom, and have a great day. Peace.